Hi everybody, this is Heather with Friends of the Page Walker, and we have started this exciting new thing because of COVID that every month we're going to take you to explore a new piece of Cary history. In particular, we'd like to share with you a piece of Cary history that you hopefully have never seen before, or maybe you've driven past a few times and didn't even realize what you were passing. Today's piece of history is exactly that kind of hidden history. It's a cemetery that dates back to the 1700s that was really untouched for decades, overgrown, and when they found it, it looked very forgotten, and it's sitting in the middle of what is now a Cary neighborhood. You've likely driven past it a bunch and haven't even seen it. So we're going to go through that cemetery today, and we have the perfect tour guide with us today. She's also a member of Friends of Page Walker, and her name is Barb, and she is, if you've been reading any of our blogs, she's the mastermind behind these blogs. She knows a ton about the history of the cemetery. She's going to tell us about what it looked like when it was discovered, when it was discovered, and how it made that journey and transition to what it looks like today, as well as some really interesting hidden pieces in the cemetery that you wouldn't notice if you came just by yourself. So I'm going to pass it to her, and we're going to walk you over to look at the cemetery.
Heather.
Yeah.
Well, as you can see, we are standing in the middle of a cul-de-sac in a modern Cary neighborhood with houses all around us. But I want you to be aware that up until the 1980s, this area was all solid woods. And if we go back even further than that, way further back to the 1700s and 1800s, this area was covered with cotton fields. And those cotton fields belonged to Nathaniel Jones, a gentleman who had moved to Wake County when he was about 26 years old and acquired by the early 1800s nearly 10,000 plus acres of land in this section of Wake County, which became all of eastern Cary eventually. And it's Nathaniel and some of his family that are buried in the cemetery that we're going to explore. This was a family plot. His manor home stood about a mile from here, up on Walnut Street at the intersection, at the corner of Greenwood Circle and Walnut Street. And if we look over here at the sign, you can see a picture of that house, which stood until the 1950s.
So this was on Walnut Street.
This was on Walnut Street, yes, at the intersection of Greenwood Circle and Walnut.
So some of you watching may remember seeing this. It was standing in the 50s.
Yes, and I'm jealous if you do remember it, because I never got to see it. It was demolished in the 1950s, and that's a sad thing. This sign was placed here by the town of Cary. This property is now owned by the town of Cary, and the Friends partner with them to help care for it. So if you visit the cemetery, and by the way, you can visit it at 100 Tolliver Court in Cary. You can take in the information that's here on the sign, and I'm going to share with you some of this as we go through.
And tell me real quick, right here, I see the pillar is tilted. We're going to look at how it looks today. That's going to be a big reveal.
Yes.
But here's the pillar tilted. Here it looks like we got a top stone off of this box.
Yes.
Tell me what it looked like. When was it found? How long had it been untouched? And what did it look like?
So we're not exactly sure how long it had been untouched. What happened is in 1971, some descendants of Nathaniel Jones were here for the centennial celebration of Cary. That was the 100th anniversary of Cary. They wanted to find this family cemetery, and they trekked through the woods looking for it. When they found it, this is what it looked like. Actually, the lid was still on the box tomb at that time in the early 1970s, but it was already showing signs of having been damaged and, not sitting fully on top. Fast forward 10 more years, two women, Ann Burns and Irene Kittinger, were doing a survey for the Wake County Cemetery Survey Project. They visited the cemetery. They found it in even worse shape.
Oh,
In
gosh.
1981, when they were here, the lid for the box tomb was intact enough that they could record what was inscribed on it, and thank goodness they did, because a year later, when they returned, it was completely off the box tomb, and that's the picture you saw on the sign. pieces of it were scattered all over the cemetery, so we suspect there was some vandalism. That occurred here.
So is this the original, or is this a remake?
No, this is a remake. This is a remake. The Friends of the Page Walker had this made. It's granite, just like the original one, and it says exactly what was on the original one.
So if you guys see the pictures, we put some pictures on the Friends of Page Walker Facebook of what the cemetery looked like when it was found. So if you go back through some of that, you'll be able to see where this entire slab was off of this box,
Yep.
and the sides were completely crumbled.
Yep.
And this, the centerpiece,
Yep.
this is so much taller than I thought. In pictures, I thought it was like my height.
About 14 feet tall.
This is quite tall.
Yes, and this, if you can picture, was leaning.
That's scary.
It's amazing you didn't fall over.
Oh gosh. That's scary. Look at this. Look at how tall this is, guys. And this is in a neighborhood. Can you imagine stumbling upon this in the woods and not knowing it's going to be here?
Yeah. And so these type of grave markers, the obelisk and the box tomb, were indicative of well-to-do people in colonial and antebellum North Carolina. And Nathaniel Jones and family was definitely well off.
Cary, people are asking for you to, Barb, Cary is asking you to speak up.
All right. I'm sorry. Heather's holding the phone, so I'm going to try and shout a little bit more. Trying to keep our social distance here. So where was I? I was talking about the...
This was indicative of a well-to-do family from that time period.
Thank you, Heather. Yes, so that's what you're seeing here. Some interesting little thing to note. You're not going to be able to see this, Heather, unfortunately, but trust me, there's some graffiti scratched into Nathaniel.
I can see it. Hold on. We can see it.
You can see possibly the
1237.
date. 1937.
5 years, 15 years.
15 years old. It says Cary, North Carolina up here. The name is up here. We know the name is there because the young lady that lived next door did a grave rubbing, and she did some research on who was Charles Dellinger anyway.
So guys, there's literally graffiti here from a 15-year-old put in here in 1937.
Yes.
That's amazing. That's a piece of history itself. Not saying that you should do graffiti on graves.
Exactly.
But now we have this piece of history. And,
yes.
And you have the story of the person.
And it's very poignant because Carla Michaels, one of our researchers at the Friends, she delved into who was Charles Dellinger even further. He was the son, one of 7 children, the oldest of 7 children of the Cary family. And very sadly, 7 years after he scratched his name into Nathaniel's tombstone, he himself was killed in World War II. So it's very poignant. The story sort of comes full circle because Nathaniel Jones was a Revolutionary War patriot. So this young teenager who scratched his name in a Revolutionary War patriot's tombstone did not know at the time that 7 years later he would lose his own life as a World War II patriot. So that kind of gives you chills when you think about it.
Someone says, call Indiana Jones.
That's probably a more recent piece of graffiti.
So, and guys, I see more here actually. What is this? Why something 30?
Yes.
Something Alexander?
Yeah, we may be revealing the sins of some of these teenagers.
Look at this. This looks like someone who maybe in 1930 or who was 30.
Yeah, and I think I see Pender here.
Pender. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh,
Yes.
there are carvings all over this.
Yes.
So guys, this isn't something you would, if you even found this place, you very likely wouldn't notice or look close enough to see these etchings.
Yes.
And it's interesting to find the history within the history here.
Yes, absolutely. And so, when we say that the cemetery had gone undiscovered for so long, obviously some teenagers in the area didn't know where it was.
Had discovered
We're
it.
being typical teenagers. But anyway, so what happened is the Friends of the Page Walker and the town got together and they put in the effort to restore the obelisk and Rachel's box tomb. So imagine this monument is pieces. Like they had this whole thing taken apart in pieces. This is one piece, this is one piece, this is a piece, this is a piece, this is a piece. They had to take the whole thing apart to get it, you know, shored up and put it on a stronger foundation. And one thing that I like to tell people is one of the engineers who worked on this project, who did an assessment of how to straighten out this tombstone, went on to be one of the key engineers in the relocation of the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse. His name was Dave Fischetti. So we are grateful to him for his work on both those projects.
Yes, and guys, by the way, if you have questions or you want to see something, you can leave a comment and we can see it. So you can ask questions in the comments, or ask us to look at something closer if there's something you're wanting to look at specifically. Part of the fun of live stream is it's like you're here and we can sort of show you things that you want to see and answer whatever questions you have, hopefully. Or
yes. Please ask any questions you like. Now, there are other people buried here in the cemetery. 9 other people. These are children and the first wife of Nathaniel Jones. So this is his second wife here in the box tomb, Rachel Cary Jones. His first wife was Millicent Blanchard Jones.
is this her?
We do not know who is buried in each of these graves because all that was left were these field stones and some broken off pieces of marble headstones down there further that we'll go see. No inscription was visible on any of these stones. So unfortunately we don't know exactly who's buried in each plot.
So why wouldn't his first wife, why did his second wife get this place of honor right next to him?
This is a good question.
And then his first wife is nameless in one of these little...
Well, I will tell you by studying some of the dates of the deaths, and we know who's buried here by family Bible records.
Family Bible.
That's how we know who's here, and we know that the first persons to be buried in the cemetery were 2 of Nathaniel and Millicent's children. Their first child, and I believe their 4th child. They both died in the same year, 1780. So they died relatively early. And so that probably is the reason that this family cemetery was created, to, hold the bodies of their 2 beloved children.
So this dates back to the 1700s, very likely.
1780.
Wow, that's...
When the first burials occurred here. And then I believe Millicent died in 1785, so she didn't die that long after them. And
let's see how broken some of these are.
yes, these were marble. These particular gravestones were marble, these 3 here. And they were broken off, and we never found any pieces of them that would indicate what had been on them.
So the people buried here are nameless. We're not sure who's
and
here.
that is why you were seeing these plain white marble markers. The town erected these to ensure that there would be a marker here, because these are kind of sinking into the ground and could easily be lost.
Yes,
over the years.
you really could. Have we gone over this with any sort of infrared imaging or anything?
Yes, the archaeology department from the state came in the 1980s and did verify that these graves existed here. There was one that did not have a marker at all. It's over there. The one that's kind of not in the line with all the
I
others.
see it, yeah.
Yeah, that one didn't have a marker at all, but the archaeologist was able to determine that there was, in fact, a grave there. So
Now, what are these little stones I see along the side here?
these are parts of the supports for the original fence. So there was an original iron fence around the cemetery. It was not here. There was no remnants of it when when the first surveyors came, or when the the descendants came. There was no fence here, just these supports. So it's possible that the iron may have been taken away and used,
You can see the iron here.
Yeah, you can see it there. And we have found some pieces. We find some little pieces of iron every now and then. There's some, I think, sitting on a support over there. We dig them up sometimes when we're pulling weeds and things from here. Now, one thing I'll point out while we're at this part of the cemetery is that the gate that we came in, which was at the other end of the cemetery, was not the original entrance to the cemetery. The original entrance was here. There would have been a dirt road going through the woods back there, probably leading up to the Jones Manor house, which is, again, about a mile away up there on Walnut Street. So that's something to keep in mind. We always kind of intrigued by this piece of stone here that's growing into the tree. In fact, I see it's got a big crack in it now. I don't remember that. The tree may have just put a crack in that recently. We sometimes think we see what might be writing on this, and we're not sure if it was kind of an, something at the entrance to the cemetery. We tried to do grave rubbings, and we just can't get a good image.
What do you guys think? Do you see any writing there? I really think it looks like I can see like some cursive here.
Yeah, or an image of some sort. We're not sure. If anybody has any ideas of how we can figure out what that says without doing, or maybe using a different material for grave rubbing, we've thought about maybe putting clay in there and making like a mold and then using that as a stamp to see if we can see what it says.
Really, from a distance, it looks more clear. Like up close, it doesn't look like writing, but when you kind of back up, it really does look like there's some kind of inscription here.
It might have been like a pillar at the original entry to the cemetery. That's our guess.
If you cross your eyes, you see a wagon wheel. Says someone named Jimmy, and who also I think asked if this was haunted. And then we have another question about why is this so far from the manor house?
Well,
because it's a mile.
It's a mile. Now, that's a good question. I mean, maybe a mile wasn't that far back then. Maybe, they got on their horses and they came down and it really wasn't that far. Could be there were, fields of cotton in between here and there, and, and they may not have known, like when those first two children died in 1780, they may not have known this was going to become, the resting place of so many others in the family.
That makes sense.
Now, one thing I will say, another thing I'll share about who's resting here. One of the children of Nathaniel and his second wife, Rachel, was a man named Wesley Jones. Wesley inherited the Jones plantation when Nathaniel died. He went on to become the father of Buck Jones. So if you are familiar with Buck Jones and Cary, Buck Jones Road in Cary,
you got a like for that.
That road was named.
We got a like. Someone's happy about learning that.
Buck Jones' dad is buried somewhere in the cemetery.
Buck Jones' dad is here. Wow. Yeah. See, and I didn't know that. And I wanted to mention on the asking about the house being far away, I would picture understanding that Nathaniel Jones' house, his homestead, was on Walnut Street and Greenwood Circle. So that's only like, if you think where we are right now, I drove on Walnut Street to get here. I would have had to go down Walnut Street. And if he had 11,000 acres of land and a lot of cotton fields, I would imagine a mile in the context of having 11,000 acres.
Seemed close.
This was probably just, they had a little path and they'd walk down here. I mean,
it seemed close. For us, it seems like a long way, but not so far for them.
Plus, they were a lot healthier. I can barely walk a mile. They probably could. I would, they're having to work farms and things like that, whereas for me, walking a mile would be, unfortunately, I'd probably never see my family graveyard if it was a mile walk.
I'm not sure, I can't remember if I mentioned at the beginning of the talk that that Nathaniel named his property White Plains because of the fields of cotton that were here, and that's why we refer to this as the White Plains Cemetery. And you may also, if you're familiar with Cary and Maynard Road, be familiar with the White Plains Methodist Church, so it bears that same name.
That's all from this one thing.
That is not that far away from where we are right now.
Yes, this is all
hard to get the context of where we are because we're still kind of in the woods. This little lot is still wooded, but we're close to Walnut Street and Maynard.
So I have a quick question, and I'd like to look at some of these other pieces here, get a closer look.
Yeah, those are the original fence.
But I remember you mentioned to me, so she's sort of giving me a tour as well. I know a lot about Raleigh history, but I'm still learning about Cary history. And this is one of the pieces of the fence support.
Yeah.
She told me that, for those of you who are familiar, I'm going to turn around. For those of you who are familiar with the founding of Raleigh, and Joel Lane being the father of Raleigh, Joel Lane, so Raleigh, first of all, Raleigh didn't really exist at the time as Raleigh. It would have just been more like a collection of larger, wealthier plantations all in that area. And Joel Lane was one of those owners. And then because there was this kind of hubbub over where the capital should be in North Carolina after New Bern was determined to be too far away, the delegates had to vote, and a lot of people were putting in, like wealthy people like Nathaniel Jones or Joel Lane, were putting in their bids for, use my land, I want my land to be where the capital of North Carolina is started to be built right here on my land. So Nathaniel Jones, he put in a bid as well, which I didn't know that.
Yes.
Against, I'm going to breathe for a second, against Joel Lane, who of course ultimately won. But if Nathaniel Jones had won, then Cary would actually be the capital and not Raleigh. It came that close.
Yeah.
And the only difference that I can see is that Joel Lane apparently had a really, really great alcoholic beverage that he served up everybody, or that's the legend.
That is the legend.
But can you tell me, you told me he's got a son named Joel Lane, which seems odd to me.
Well, when I was doing some research about the 16 children that Nathaniel Jones had between two wives, I noticed that one of the children's names was Joel Lane. Joel Lane Jones. So I'm going to assume that they probably were friends. If you name your child after someone, you probably admired and respected them. So,
or you didn't like your kid, and you were like, you're gonna be a sneaky child. I can tell. I'm gonna name you after Joel Lane. So, is there anything else? We've been going a while. We have a pretty good audience. We have about 40 people watching, which is fantastic, guys. And just so you guys know, we are going to be doing a tour of a place. Someone behind me, see her. We have friends with us. We're going to be doing a tour like this once a month. So if you have ideas of things you would like to see us write about or focus on, please go to our Facebook, send us a message, make a post. Let us know what kind of history in Cary you want to know about. We have some ideas in mind for October, which I think are going to be exciting, but I'll tell you about those in a minute. But I wanted to flip this around to let you know we've been going for a while. So is there anything else that you think is really important that we definitely have to see?
I realize now that I'm getting breathing and getting my mind more into it. I forgot to tell you about the two Nathaniel Joneses.
Oh, that's right.
So these are the pieces of iron that I mentioned that we sometimes dig up when we're pulling weeds around.
Talk about, these things are from probably the 17 or 1800s.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
They're pretty heavy. I mean, they were probably involved somehow in the original fence. I'm not exactly sure how.
I feel like they should go in a museum.
Yeah, I'll get them over to Chris. We've given a couple pieces to the Cary Museum at the Page Walker Hotel, so we'll get those over to her too. But yes, back in the 1700s, there were two Nathaniel Joneses in Cary, two prominent Nathaniel Joneses. They were not related. One of them owned 10,000 acres here that comprised what's now the eastern part of Cary. The other one owned a large amount of land over in the western part of Cary, near Crabtree Creek. So to distinguish these two Nathaniel Joneses, they were both very prominent, both involved in political matters, and the townspeople would refer to them as Nathaniel Jones of White Plains and Nathaniel Jones of Crabtree in order to keep them straight. Then in the late 1700s, the two families were joined through marriage when Nathaniel Jones's daughter of White Plains, Nancy, married Nathaniel Jones of Crabtree's son, Henry. And they wound up living in the house that's on Chapel Hill Road that some Cary people may notice as that old white house with a double porch that you drive by and you wonder, what's that? That was the home of Nancy and Henry.
I didn't know that.
So Nathaniel Jones's daughter Nancy is the Nancy Jones for whom the Nancy Jones house is named.
And for that house is amazing.
The Jones connections get so confusing. You have to really write it down. Many of the Jones descendants from both those Nathaniel Joneses wound up being significant contributors to the Cary community over the years, and so maybe we'll do some more on them in the future.
Yeah,
there's a lot to say about.
If your last name is Jones and you live in the area, look into your family history. You might be Cary royalty.
Yes. And they were some of the early, first settlers here in this area.
Yes, Cary has a lot of history. Yeah. So I think, are we ready to wrap up?
I think
What?
Oh, I can't forget this part.
Oh.
Nathaniel Jones is probably most well known for having put in his will 50 years before the Emancipation Proclamation that he wished for his slaves to be freed upon his death. And you can read some of the reasons why. He cited 4 reasons why he wanted his slaves freed. Not the least of which was, he wanted a clear conscience. He didn't think it was right. I thought it went against the principles of freedom that our country was founded on. And so that was unusual. He did stipulate that so long as the law allowed, he wanted his slaves to be free. And unfortunately, when he died, the law did not allow. But he did say that he wanted his enslaved persons to go to his children and wife. And that's what happened. So they weren't sold off.
They weren't, yes. It's unfortunate the law didn't allow it, but that is pretty amazing that right here in Cary, people don't realize the rich history Cary has, and that something like that, which was wildly, unordinary, out of ordinary for the day, that was happening right here, and that awareness. So yeah, this land here has a lot of history. It's not just a Cary neighborhood.
That's right.
All right, I'm gonna flip things back around. So, and I'm gonna remove this so I can breathe again. Trying to be safe. I hope you guys enjoyed. She gave a wonderful tour. I learned a lot of things, and I'm a historian, so there's just so much here, and people don't realize the deep history that Cary has. We have so many cool stories, things that you drive past every day and don't even realize how important that is.
Yes, we like to say we're not just a containment area for the relocated Yankees. We do have a history.
We do have a lot of history here. For the people who have been born in Cary and the people who are Cary by choice and who have moved here, like my family, there's just a rich history here that everyone should know about. So, like I said, each month, the Friends of Paige Walker on our Facebook, we are going to have a new, interesting, and little-known historic site that we will explore each month. We will do pictures and stories and blog articles for the month, and then we will end the month with a tour like we did this time, take you a tour. Next month, I believe we are thinking about Hillcrest Cemetery, and that is for October. We do have a lot of really cool, I love ghost stories, and I saw somebody asking here if this cemetery is haunted. If you want to hear about Cary ghost stories and legends, wait for Halloween. We have some lined up, and again, whether they're real or not real isn't the point. It's that these oral traditions and legends have been passed down as part of Cary's culture. So we will definitely touch on those in October. We'll have lots of posts about interesting, spooky stories and legends that are based on Cary history, and we'll top it off with exploring Hillcrest Cemetery, which is much bigger and has a lot of really interesting stories. I've heard ghost stories and legends, and I've heard from actual ghost hunters who have gone there and had experiences too. So,
as far as we know, there are no stories of hauntings at this cemetery.
Right.
And I can tell you, having been a volunteer and worked here for many years, I don't feel the sense that this is haunted at all. I feel more of a sense of gratitude from the family that we have restored the cemetery and taken care of it.
Someone is sad that there's no ghosts. But there are ghost stories in Cary, some really cool ones. There's a whole legend of a ghost horse that runs around the Ambassador Loop. Guys, there's some cool ghost stories. So you'll get to hear those in October. So follow us. If you're not following us on Facebook, go ahead and follow us. And if you have suggestions of things you want to see explored or stories you want to see told, let us know. Another thing to be aware of is there is a play that's going to be released as part of the 150th anniversary celebration. We're actually looking for people to send in their personal stories or pieces of Cary history that are just very meaningful to you. So come to Friends of Paige Walker. We actually have a post about that as well, and how you can get involved in sharing any historic stories or stories about your grandparents or great-grandparents that you want to see put in a play. Send us those stories and let us know about them so we can document them and maybe make them part of the 150th anniversary celebration. So thanks for watching, everybody. And be sure, if you're at home, give an applause here for Barb. She did a great job. And we'll see you next month. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
Yes, it was a pleasure introducing you all to this historic treasure. Truly one of the most historic sites in Cary. It dates back almost to our beginnings, to our very first settlers. So please come and visit it.
Yeah, definitely come take a look at it. All right. Bye, everybody.